So Kate, it would be great to talk a little bit about our children's friendships and their relationships and the effect on them.
Yeah, and it's something I'm hearing a lot from parents about, a lot of concern, because we've seen the impact on our children's social world that's been so enormous. It's been so narrowed down, and particularly for younger children, I know a lot of parents who are saying, you know, my children are barely seeing anyone and they've become used to that. And I think the way that this has impacted children does depend a bit on their age. And again, for most, they will be able to be quite flexible to adapt, and when we do return to a more normal pattern of life, they'll adapt again gradually. But it is something that they will need a little support with. And as parents, we can do that. We can help them manage that change. And like in so many things, the message is that we just need to remember it's not necessarily all about negative. You know, my son was a typical boy when this all started, a typical lad of his age. He didn't really talk to his friends. They just played football. They ran around. He was hugely physical, hugely active. When lockdown happened and we first put him on Zoom and got his friends together because they were missing each other, put them on Zoom, and he literally looked at the screen, looked at me and said, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, you talk to them. And he was, what? And it's just, I don't think it had ever occurred to him that you could do that. Now, he's so chatty, so verbal, and he and his friends are online chatting all the time. So I think, like in all things, there's some areas where our kids have grown and discovered new things in this season, but they might need some help as they adjust back.
That's really helpful. So, and what about sort of teenagers? Because the peer group for our teens is so important, isn't it? So how's that affected them, do you think? Obviously, they've been able to connect online, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and teenagers have adapted really well because they were already using those online spaces for friendships anyway. So actually, a lot of teens have managed really well, but their social world has narrowed. You know, psychologists are talking about something called friendship funneling. It's that narrowing down of our relationships to the most core, the most solid. And that's natural in a season like this. But as we come out of it, what we have to do is the opposite and get used to broadening again. And so all the usual teenage challenges about friendship, you know, who's friends with who likes who's had an argument with who, it's just intensified. So again, for us, it's just about reassuring and holding that space for them and helping them navigate some of the inevitable fallouts and misunderstandings that will happen.
That's really helpful. And I guess that idea of the funneling might mean that some children are left out in the cold. You know, they don't have that best friend because they've been left out.
Yeah, I think that's the most brutal end of funneling, is when you just suddenly realise that apparently you were no one's first choice, no one's best. And it's not personal. In fact, many people have limited at some point right down to just their household or the people that they're seeing day to day, because it's been so hard. And the impact of exhaustion as we went further through the pandemic made that more extreme. But for the children who've perhaps felt very isolated or who have discovered that they perhaps haven't been in contact with people, or those who don't have access to the internet, they weren't so able to use those tech methods of communicating, that's a bigger bridge for them to cross when they come back into normal life.
No, I can see that. And I guess also it will depend, you know, only as parents, we know our children best. We love them most, but we know their different personalities. And so I imagine their personalities will come into the mix as well. But what can we do as parents to help them in this?
Again, I think it's about us as parents holding the challenges that our children are experiencing as much as possible without anxiety, creating those spaces where they can talk, where they can bounce back and forth what's happening. You know, particularly in adolescence, one of the jobs that your children have as they develop into adults is to learn how to do relationships. And they are learning, so they will make mistakes. And one day it might be that somebody else made the mistake and said something that upset them. Another day it may be them who did it. You know, online communications are much more prone to misunderstanding and error than in-person ones, so there may be some things that they need to work out that happened through pandemic. And as the adults, as parents in their life, we can help them to do that. And also help them to recognise that just if they did make a mistake, that doesn't mean they're a bad person. It is just part of this journey of understanding and growing and getting better at it, hopefully. It's good for them to know, isn't it, that even as adults, sometimes we make mistakes, we fall out. I know my daughter, who's a teenager, she talks a lot about having seen me do friendship and seen me sometimes have to go to friends and say, I'm really sorry, I made a mess of that or whatever it was. So we can help them.
Oh, that is so helpful, Kate. Just that, that sense of, we're on that journey with them, helping them as they manage these relationships, which in turn builds their character. So thank you. That was really great.